Year-old was convicted of outraging public decency. Police are now looking to calm the tension that they say this incident has caused. Jules Hyam, BBC Points West.
A woman in her 70s is in hospital after being badly injured following a collision with a cyclist in Bristol. It happened as she was crossing the road in Bedminster just before 9 this morning. A 26-year-old man has been arrested.
A radical new way to get rough sleepers off the streets is being introduced in Swindon.
For the first time, the homeless won't have to prove that they're free of drug or alcohol problems before getting somewhere to live. It's all part of a scheme. It's called Housing First. With more, here's Scott Ellis.
No, what do you mean, they're butt me?
Free food in Swindon for those who need it. Government funding's helped to cut the estimated number of rough sleepers here from 45 to 28 in just 1 year. The aim is no rough sleepers at all by 2027. So they're trying a new scheme called Housing First. A dozen people will be housed and supported without first having to prove they're drug or alcohol free.
It'll take that thing away where they'll be on the streets. They think, oh, I'll only get kicked out for using drugs, so I might as well stay on the street.
It's the right way, definitely. With support, though, I think you're better off with support, because then you're not going to mess up so much because you've got that going on in the back of your head.
The normal route off the street for rough sleepers is into emergency shelters and hostels, then qualifying for accommodation by proving they're leading a healthier lifestyle. But it doesn't work for everyone. People can slip up and down the system and sometimes end up back on the street. Housing First sees a room as a basic human right, not a reward for clinical success. It includes close support for addictions, but with no conditions attached. The organiser of the food handout thinks Housing First will help some of her customers.
Because it gives them hope. 60% of the homeless here do have an addiction, and the rules are the dry houses and the rules, and that kind of makes them think they're better off on the street.
Housing First is used in the US, Canada and some European countries. Trials in the UK have shown it can save more than £4,000 per person per year in support costs. Scott Ellis, BBC Points West.
Well, the idea of Housing First is already being trialled actually in Bristol. 12 places of permanent accommodation are being offered to rough sleepers. Joining us now to tell us more about how it's working is Aileen Edwards, the Chief Executive of Second Step, which is running the scheme. Thank you for coming in, Aileen. So how successful has this been when you're watching it taking place elsewhere?
So what we know is that Housing First works. So we set up this pilot last May and it's going really well. We've housed 6 people to date. Some people have been sleeping rough on the streets for absolutely years. I could talk to you about Matt, who was a veteran, who's been sleeping on the streets since the 1980s, and we housed him last year through the Housing First, and it's going really well. He suffers from panic attacks and anxiety. He's got trauma in his past. And we work really closely with him, but actually it's going really well. It's really
I know one of the concerns has been that there may not be the incentive to come off drink or drugs if you're given a house straight away.
But actually what you're doing is giving people a safe place and stability, and it allows them then to think about making other changes in their lives. And we're providing them with intensive support to help them to think about what other changes they want to make. And it's a big step to have some to move into their own homes. So actually what you're doing is making a big change.
And also you're putting all of the emphasis onto them, really, aren't you? Because if it comes pretty much without conditions, but there is this range of services there if you want them, do you find that that does make a change psychologically?
Absolutely. It's almost like someone can start to settle down and think about what other changes they want to make. They can put down roots. They're not like camping or moving around or having to move from one hostel to another. They can then start to think about other things in their lives. And actually what we know is that Housing First is effective. York University says that 80% of Housing First tenants are still in their tenancies, which, given that people have got long histories of rough sleeping, like Matt has been sleeping rough for 32 years. And yeah. So huge, momentous step for him. Yeah, 80% are successful, and it saves money in the long term.
It's really interesting.
Well, thank you for the work that you do, and
Okay,
thanks
thank
for
you.
coming in and talking to us about
Thank you.
it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, farmers in Somerset have today been bidding for animal feed in an auction that's seen prices double.